coming to you live from the Built Ford Tough Studio. Boomer Esiason, Greg Giannotti. It's Boomer and Gio on the Fan. Simulcast across the country on CBS Sports Network. And wherever you are, the free Odyssey app. Good Friday morning, a feel-good football Friday, a feel-good Halloween Friday, a feel-good Boomer Friday because the Rangers won. That's right. We don't get poopy pants Boomer on this Friday morning. We get happy, fired up Boomer, and that's what we need on a feel-good football Friday. The Baltimore Ravens, yes, some are saying they're back. Lamar Jackson, he comes back. The defense smothering against a team that is terrible. Is probably going to fire their coach, but still, big win for them as they try to climb back from that 1-5 hole. We've got the Giants and Niners as the only local story in football around here, with the Jets being off. As I did mention, Boomer is fired up. He stayed up, watched the Rangers beat the Oilers, and the Islanders had a weird situation yesterday with their best player. We'll get into all of it. Good morning, Boomer. How are you?
Yeah, good morning, G. I'm doing great, and man, it was a great win for the Rangers last night without question. It was a great win for the Baltimore Ravens, and they got their quarterback back. He threw 4 touchdown passes last night. And if there is any team in this league that can come back from the deficit they started the season with, it's going to be the Ravens, especially if Lamar Jackson gets better and better and better and better. You know, I thought like early on in the game last night, a little bit kind of like jumpy and wasn't really comfortable. And then all of a sudden they get that great turnover inside the 20-yard line. Next thing you know, he's rolling out and he's throwing his touchdown pass to Mark Andrews. And I was like, okay, they're going to be fine.
Yep.
And you can see that they do have a number of playmakers all over the field, especially on offense. The defense is tightened up the last 2 weeks, which is something that we talked about when they were coming out of the bye, how all those defensive players that said they had needed a reset and they had to get some of their guys back, including Roquan Smith. And you start thinking about, okay, what have they done? They've beaten Chicago and Miami in back-to-back weeks, and now they have another 10 days off, a little bit of a rest period here. And then they come back and they got at Minnesota, at Cleveland, the Jets, Cincinnati, and Pittsburgh, all teams
that they should beat, and they'll be favored in the game. Yeah, I mean, and that's why everybody looked at the schedule when they were 1-5 and knew that Lamar was going to come back one of these last 2 weeks and still had them as favorites of winning the AFC North. I mean, the schedule is a big part of it now that we have a good idea of who these teams are and who's playing quarterback for these teams. So, yeah, I mean, maybe a bit of fool's gold the last couple of weeks, and maybe it's going to be the same when they take on some of these bad teams coming up as well. But we know how good the coach and the quarterback are, and if the defense could look anything like they did last night down in Miami for the rest of the year, then of course they're going to be a force to be reckoned with. But, you know, the Miami Dolphins are broken. We know that. I thought that Mike McDaniel was going to get fired after that blowout in Cleveland. They get blown out national TV. Thursday Night Football in their own building. They're getting booed off the field. I don't know if they let him go now. I'm not sure what the deal is there, but, you know, the Ravens don't care. The Ravens right now are just going to trample everybody in their path after the miserable start, and I'm sure that the Buffalo Bills and the Indianapolis Colts and the Kansas City Chiefs are not happy to see this, but the Ravens have re-entered the chat.
Yeah, they have re-entered the chat, and for the Miami Dolphins, I mean, look, 3 turnovers, 2 fumbles, and an interception by Tua. The inadvertent penalties that just killed them. And, you know, you saw Mike McDaniel go crazy on the sideline last night in the first quarter. And he did so because he's frustrated, like every coach gets frustrated when teams do stupid things that hurt themselves. You know, they're going to go for it on 4th and 1, whatever it was, 4th and 2, and all of a sudden they have a false start penalty. I mean, it's a killer, and that's what losing teams do. They make mistakes in big spots, and unfortunately for Mike McDaniel and Tua, who seems to be a little bit off, you know, obviously they're missing Tyreek Hill. That's a huge loss for them. I mean, it's the speed guy, the difference maker, put the ball in his hands 5 yards down the field, and he can turn it into a 95-yard touchdown run, and they don't have that anymore, and that's a big part of their offense because their defense is young, it's inexperienced, and you know, it's not, you know, with the exception of Matt Judon and I would say Minka Fitzpatrick, I'm like, hey, you know, it's an okay defense. You know, they got some young players playing in there, but I don't know, man. I don't know what's going to happen there. It does definitely feel like the winds of change are happening. And I think we've said that now for about a month, especially after they lost Tyreek Hill. So, you know, which is, I guess, in some respects, it's good news for the Jets, but it's also could be bad news for the Jets because the Dolphins could actually, leapfrog them in the tankathon standings.
Yeah, I mean, it may be. I mean, it is possible because they are such a mess, and you don't want to see that, especially because, I mean, it's not out of the question that Tua ends up on another organization or on another team next year, and the Miami Dolphins decide with a new coach, and I don't know if a new GM because of the whole Chris Greer and Brian Flores thing and what's going on with that. Chris Greer might have a job for life, but you might see them draft a quarterback and then move on from Tua if they can. I mean, the Tua in Miami thing is not as tenuous as the Mike McDaniel in Miami thing, but I wouldn't be surprised if this were it at the end of this season for Tua as a Dolphin.
I wouldn't be surprised either, and I'm telling you, somebody would want him. I mean, I still think he's a really good player. I'm not saying that he's playing well this year. I think he's made his mistakes. I think he's tried to lead by words as opposed to examples. And I think sometimes, guys who are not comfortable doing that end up, doing the wrong thing. And maybe just totally, I don't know. I feel like if he's got his full complement of receivers and he's reading the defenses right and he's on, then he's about as sweet a thrower and an accurate thrower as there is in the NFL. It's just that this has not been the case this year for him. He's just having a really off year. And it's frustrating to watch because we watched him, was it 2 years ago, where he really went out there and played great. And there were even talks about him being the MVP until they went on the road, I think, to Baltimore and to Buffalo, and they lost games that year, and then all of a sudden he kind of fell off the face of the earth.
Yeah, it was the year that they had the Hard Knocks in season where Mike McDaniel was the toast of the town, and they had the GoPro camera on Tua's helmet in practice, and you saw him getting the ball out, and it was just like the team
Remember they put 70 points on the Broncos?
Yeah, it was incredible. Like they were like the new hot thing, and then their defense was very good, and then they lost a bunch of players. They lost a bunch of games towards the end, and then they had to go on the road in the playoffs in like negative 20 degrees to play the Chiefs, and they had absolutely no chance to win that game. And ever since then, ever since that fall off at the end of the regular season 2 years ago, they've never gotten it back together.
Well, their defense hasn't been great. They've had injuries at the running back position, and again, this year the big one was Tyreek Hill. It's sad to watch how a good team, a good player, a really good offensive coach in Mike McDaniel. He may not be the best guy behind the microphone, maybe, kind of a little bit of a loose cannon, but, it just feels like it's coming to the end. And they kept showing Dan Marino last night. I was just thinking, I know what he's thinking. I know exactly what he's thinking.
Yeah. We talked about the Brian Daboll, Jackson Dart, in the relation to the New England Patriots and what they did after drafting Drake May and how they got the right offensive coordinator in Josh McDaniels for Drake May, and he's going off now. I know Brian Daboll is someone who loves Jackson Dart and seems to be working well with him, but if the Giants did go in another direction and wanted to go out and get an offensive coordinator, I mean, Mike McDaniel could be available. Will be available most likely, and I think that he's going to be a hot commodity to run an offense, obviously not to run a team, but that is going to be something to watch for a team that's looking to upgrade offensively on their coaching staff once he's available, much like Rob Saleh was, as a defensive coordinator after the Jets let him go. I mean, immediately he went up to Green Bay and was hanging out with Matt LaFleur,
his buddy, yep.
Yeah, and now he's back with the Niners doing his thing. So some of these guys just aren't cut out to be head coaches. They're much better as coordinators, and there's going to be a team that's going to jump all over Mike McDaniel and his offensive thoughts and just know that he just can't be the head guy somewhere.
Yeah, I mean, and he comes out of like the Shanahan, LaFleur, McVay, that group. That's where he comes out of.
Yeah.
So that's pretty much the offense he's running. And, I would love to see him as an offense coordinator somewhere because, he would bring a dynamic offense to whoever is the young quarterback that he's going to be asked to kind of really get going again. And by the way, any one of these coaches that he has worked for that is a head coach would be more than happy to hire him tomorrow.
Yeah.
So it's not like he's going to be out of football. And by the way, maybe his message would be better for college. There are these major college universities out there scouring the landscape for who their next coach is going to be. And guys like Matt Rule and Dan Lannon, they've signed extensions. They don't want to go anywhere. I saw an interview with Dan Lannon yesterday, the coach of Oregon. Basically, I don't want to go anywhere. And he goes, because he was asked about the firing of James Franklin after James Franklin was in the college football playoff last year. And then all of a sudden they turn around and they fire him because it's a body of work and it's a reoccurring theme about what was going on at Penn State not being able to beat top 10 teams and not winning a national championship. And that's one of the reasons why James ended up getting fired. But, Dan Lannon said, I got to win. If I want to stay here, I got to win. That's the number one thing that you have to do as a college football coach. So I just wonder if Mike McDaniel wouldn't be better suited. Yeah. Could you imagine him as a college football coach?
No, I can't imagine him as a head football coach anywhere after the stuff that we heard about nobody respecting him. And I understand what Tua was talking about was different. That was player-only meetings. But prior to that, we heard about how guys were late and Tyreek Hill and this and that and Jalen Ramsey, and nobody respected him. So if I'm an athletic director, if I'm a president of a university, if I'm a GM or an owner in the NFL, I'm not hiring the guy as a head coach.
I think it all depends on what school. It all depends on what school for him. I don't see him in the SEC for sure.
I mean, you can go and coach Columbia. That'd be perfect. I think he played at Yale, Eddie? Played at Yale. That would be great. That'd be the place where the quirkiness might fly. If Mike McDaniel ended up in the SEC somewhere, they would chew
him up and spit him out.
Yeah, right. Exactly.
Yeah. No,
yeah, they'd have a sacrifice. They would sacrifice him. In a town square. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, I know what you're saying.
Right. So
I know what you're saying, but I just I feel bad for that because that Tua and him there for a while were about as exciting and great football and great offensive football to watch when it was working.
Yeah,
the concepts, the lefty thrower, the accuracy. I mean, the ball would melt in the hands of the receivers. I mean, all of that stuff a couple years back was just so much fun to watch. And really, I think it for whatever reason, and I think you hit the nail on the head. It's the lack of respect for the coach by certain players that unfortunately then erodes the team.
Yeah, and by the way, like Josh McDaniels was a guy who couldn't be a head coach and always had, his best success was with a big alpha defensive-minded head coach. He's doing it again with a different guy in Mike Vrabel, and that's totally fine. So what Mike McDaniel needs to have is he needs to have a head coach who's the man, clearly the man, and he can be, in his little lab and be a weirdo behind the scenes doing what he needs to do and then talk once a week on Thursdays like coordinators do, work with the quarterback and be behind the scenes, and he'll be a great coach. But he needs to be paired up with someone like Mike Vrabel.
Do you think that Tennessee would think, I don't know who Tennessee's going to hire. I know that Mike McCoy, the interim coach, is basically auditioning for the job right now as he's coaching the team. It doesn't look great because they've lost their last two since they fired Brian Callahan. But do you think that, that would be a spot as an offensive coordinator to work with Cam Ward?
Sure. I mean, absolutely. I think any young quarterback who is in need of a new coach, I mean, Mike McDaniel would be great for. I'm just trying to think like some of the other people that are like the teams. You always have to look at the teams that are having success and who's on those staffs. So, like the Indianapolis Colts right now.
Lou Anarumo, I mean, that would be the one guy that everybody knows in the NFL, and he's the defense coordinator.
Well, right, but I know that Shane Steichen is an offensive mind, and he is the head coach, but like that staff could be rated offensively if they keep this up with Daniel Jones and Jonathan Taylor, right?
Yeah, again,
who's their offensive coordinator? Do we know?
Shane Steichen is kind of like Nick Sirianni, like he's involved.
Oh, it's Jim Bob Cooter.
Yeah,
he's back.
Yeah, he's not. Yeah, but Shane Steichen, much like my buddy Frank, is involved. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
he's not standing there, just not doing anything. But it's just amazing when you have players and you have a great offensive line, a top running game in the league, and then all of a sudden you're playing against 3-man secondaries because you got 7 men up and around the line of scrimmage to stop Jonathan Taylor. The amount of ease at which it is, I'm not saying totally easy, but it's easier to read the defenses and you can find your man coverages. And Daniel Jones has just been like a breath of fresh air for Shane Steichen. They can't do all this stuff unless they have a quarterback that can do it. You have to be able to communicate as a quarterback. You got to get everybody in the right spot. You got to make sure everybody's on the same page. You got to make sure you have the right personnel groupings on the field with you. And then the coach has the entire playbook to open. And you're not tapping yourself out of the game. You know what I'm saying?
Yes.
So you have a mature, kind of scarred, I would say. That's who Daniel Jones is. That's who Baker Mayfield is. That's who Sam Darnold and Geno Smith have been. They've been scarred because they've been in bad places. And now all of a sudden, he goes to Minnesota, watches how that whole thing transpires with Kevin O'Connell and Sam Darnold, and then goes to Indianapolis. And Indy has a really good team. They have an underrated roster because they just haven't had the quarterback. They had a good roster when Frank was there, and they just couldn't get the right quarterback to stay there for 4 or 5 years. They were trying to patch it up with a stopgap guy. And just like, at one point in my career, I was a stopgap guy. It turned out that, Phillip Rivers was a stopgap guy there. They tried, Matt
Ryan.
Matt Ryan. They tried him. I mean, they tried everything. Jacoby Brissett was there, and now they're going to be confronted with a really interesting situation, much like the Giants were after they won that playoff game in Minnesota.
I think that Jim Bob Cooter, because of his name, isn't taken as seriously for a head coaching job. Like if his name was just Jim Jenkins, that more people would be like, let's bring in Jenkins, see what he has to say.
Let's bring in Jim Bob Cooter to LSU.
Well, that would be different.
Thinking.
But like the NFL, do you think there's an owner like, man, this guy seems great, but we can't. I mean, I can't be introducing Jim Bob Cooter as the face of my franchise.
Yeah,
that conversation definitely has been, without a doubt. Like there's Northeast teams that we can't have Jim Bob Cooter as the.
Here's Bill Belichick and Jordan Hudson. They got to be running our team. How's that?
Well, that's not happening. Okay. There's no way that's happening. No, not anymore. Sorry. If an NFL team did that, I would be floored now after everything that's gone on.
Well, we all know that there's going to be 5 to 6 openings, maybe even 7. We know that. And there's always a couple surprises that come out of nowhere, just because things have gotten stale for certain people. You just never know.
Yeah,
guys hanging on by their fingertips.
Every year, same cycle. All right, Boomer and Gio just getting started on this Feel Good Football Friday, Halloween 2025. Jerry Recco joins us in just a couple of minutes.